Hi everyone, this is Anirudh. I go by Ani as well. This is my first podcast ever, and welcome to Bag of Gems. I'm not going to stick to one area. In general, my plan is to talk a lot of topics, like a lot of topics in terms of like cars, startups, technology, geopolitics, cinema, sports, anything. I'm open for suggestions. Have you ever heard about digitalization? Well, if not, I have my first guest today, who is Kumar Singaraju, who is also a partner at EY. Someone who doesn't know EY, it's one of the big four consulting firms which offer a lot of consulting services to Fortune 500 companies or any startups as well. But let's hear from him what he can introduce to us. Hi, Kumar. So excited to
Hey,
have
Annie,
you.
elated to be here.
Yeah, can you quickly give us an intro of what you do exactly?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you. I'm excited equally in terms of being a part of your show. Uh, I'm more than honored to be your first guest, I guess. So, to answer your question, I run digital and platform engineering for EY from their global delivery organization. What that means is all things open source, cloud native, full stack technologies, right? So that's sort of my full-time role, and obviously we do a lot of things internally within the firm. But I'm happy to be here and answer any questions that you might have. I've
I
been
do
living
have a lot of
for
questions.
years.
Yes. So,
But
just for the audience, sorry, you're going to say something.
no, I was going to say, yeah, I've been living in India for the last few years. Spent most of my adult career out in the continental US. So I've seen best of both worlds. So depending on the topic, right, I'm happy to share my views in terms of how India has advanced in the last few years.
That's one of the reasons I wanted to have you as my first guest because, in my personal opinion, you have seen and worked with a lot of Fortune 500 companies in terms of bringing up their digital platforms. So I thought you were the best person to discuss about this. All
Awesome.
right, let's dig into the questions which I have written down. Just for our audience here, can you quickly give like a intro about the digitalization and help characterize the term if you can?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously there is digitization and digitalization, right? So these sort of two terms get used interchangeably. So let me just maybe spend a minute to clarify, right? There's a lot of overlap, but there's also a little bit of a distinction, right? When we talk about digitization, right, it's all things related to sort of storage, transmission, any sampling, quantization you do, any signal manipulation. So effectively, if you want to look at platforms like Spotify or Instagram in terms of data storage plus social engineering that happens, which has helped revolutionize industries, right, and jumpstart where they were previously. That process is quote unquote digitization. Digitalization, as in, which is building efficiencies to everyday processes, right? Effectively bringing better business outcomes, right? It also can mean a lot of information transmission, right? So, effectively, digitalization, if organizations are going through that, it's primarily driven by profitability and efficient business. And don't get me wrong, right? There's a lot of similarities also between these two terms. Uh, Primarily, they're both tech driven. They're both sort of, we can make the same argument in terms of driving productivity and efficiency, leveraging data, all of it, right? So
Right.
that's sort of the fundamental differences.
No, that's I think that's enough for the audience to understand the basic differences. Thanks for that. So, what do you think is the main driver, and who is, according to you, was the key person or a division to implement such a massive initiative in the country like India with like 1.4 billion people?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so like I was saying in my intro, right? I've had the fortune of spending the last few years being a part of this growth story on this side of the planet, where there's a lot of technology depth, scale, there's innovation, ingenuity, all of it coming out from this side. But to really sort of point it back to your question, right? So first things first, India sort of attained critical mass, right, as the fifth largest economy in the world. and it has realized primarily on the account of its, I would say, policies, economic liberalization, which made it more market centric, right? Allowed for a greater role for private capital in the process of the global competitiveness. Now, how did this all happen, and what was the vision, and who was the driver behind this? I think one name really comes to mind. One visionary is a great tech entrepreneur. His name, I'm sure every one of your viewers have heard, is Mr. Nandan Nilekani, right? Who is the co-founder of Infosys, one of the tech giants from this region. So he took a detour, and he served as a chairman of a body called UIAI, right? Unique Identification Authority of India, a cabinet ranking position, right? And he's entered into that under the invitation of the Prime Minister's office. So, as a chair of that UIDIA, rather, he was responsible for implementing the envisioned multi-purpose national identity card. And the real key distinguisher in this one is it's all digital, right? It was sort of aimed to provide a unique identification number for all the residents of India, and primarily used as a basis for efficient delivery of welfare services. That's how this thing started, right? This envision, I would say, identification method was all biometric enforced, and he has embarked on this drive to create this government database for the entire population of the country. And it was sort of called the biggest social project on the planet, right? So with that, I think he's gone on that journey and made the Indian biometric ID system pretty much has all the demographic information, addresses of all the individuals in a matter of 7 years, which is unheard of, right? Over
Yeah.
1 billion people, close to 1.15 billion people, got their IDs sort of secure.
I think this can become like a case study, and because this is like his brainchild, and it's really amazing to see such a massive implementation within 7 years. That's amazing.
Yeah, matter of fact,
So
back in 16, just to finish that thought, right? So, World Bank chief economist also called this the most sophisticated ID program in the world, right? Because the program, obviously, there's always criticism in terms of such large scale initiatives, but I mean, what India was able to do and create that digital infrastructure, which effectively became the underpinning aspect, right, for all things
right.
India stack and the center of our conversation today.
Talking about criticism, even Abdul Kalam had critics. So,
Yeah.
um, what do you think this phase of implementation do you say India is currently in? Is it like totally implemented, or still there are any gaps, or where do you currently see this implementation?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, the short answer is there's always room for growth, right?
Right.
But if I were to step back and sort of give you a macro picture, right, at the outset, the economy's position, right, has gone from, for India, right, has gone from being the 10th largest about 10 years ago to the fifth largest today, right? Now, that's a huge, significant jump, right? And in a matter of less than a decade, right? And India has been the fastest growing major economy for the third year in a row. It's a very bright spot, right?
Right.
And it is most likely, I mean, the trends are sort of, uh, you know, very evident. It's most likely to overtake Germany and Japan, and will become the third largest economy after US and China by 2030, right? To put things in perspective, we're already sitting end of 23, which is like beginning of 24. We're talking 5, 6 years from now, right? Which is huge.
Right.
Now, if the question is more about how has digitalization helped, right? Digitalization has sort of become a force multiplier, right? Especially for
Mhm.
India, right? So
Right.
put things in perspective, right? For your viewers, I'll take a sector like a large telecom subscriber, right? A base of 1.2 billion population, right? I'm talking a little bit historic here, and about 830 odd internet users, right? People who are connected all the time, combined with the government's focus on building digital platforms, right, have laid foundations for a digital economy. It has enabled sort of development and a robust payments ecosystem, right? And then it
Mhm.
sort of has strengthened the governance. So I think the government's focus and consistent backing of all these initiatives over the last decade, I believe strongly, right, that has created India's position very uniquely in terms of scaling the DPI, which is the digital public infrastructure, right?
Mhm.
Which essentially is yielding a lot of economic benefits, right, and growth for innovation and entrepreneurship, right? So just to throw some numbers at your viewers, right? So I mean, briefly talked about the India stack, right? I'm sure most of your viewers have heard about it, but building on top of the India stack is a widely used or widely scaled adoption of UPI, the Unified
Right.
Payments Interface, right? About 260 million unique users, right? It's almost like pushing the limits closer to the population of the entire United States, right? Just to sort of draw some parallels,
Yeah.
right? India today accounts for the highest volume of real-time digital payments among
Mhm.
businesses globally, right? That in itself is about 40% of all such transactions, right?
Wow.
So this has sort of enabled a formalized sort of a growth sec for the economy, a greater financial inclusion. It's created a tremendous market opportunity for entrepreneurship, and then the startup ecosystem has just completely exploded, right? It has
Right.
gone from somewhere in the 10,000 startups to about a 90,000 to 100,000 startups in a matter of like 6 7 years,
And we
right?
can see so many unicorns now compared to
Yeah, exactly.
five,
Yeah,
six
yeah,
years.
absolutely. Speaking of unicorns, right? So over the past 4 years, I would say, right, year over year, growth of startups is upwards of about 65 70%, right?
Wow.
And the number of additional unicorns being added every year is very, very encouraging to see. So as of last year, India has over 120 unicorns with a total valuation of, I mean, I think it's over $350 billion, right?
Wow.
So it's massive, right? Unicorn is like any like fintech or a startup which
Right.
is valued over a billion. Now you're talking about 120 unicorns, and look at the valuation of 350 billion, right? And you can do the math.
True. True. So
So I
that
think
being said, like, yeah, sorry, finish your thought.
no, one last point I want to add, or maybe close out on that, is see, in a nutshell, right? So India has seen a massive jump in ahead in terms of financial inclusion in just a matter of 7 years, right? It typically, based on the studies, they have predicted that this could have taken anywhere close to half a century, right? So I think I'm more fascinated personally in terms of the adoption and the rate at which it was adopted in this region was just like mind blowing.
No wonder. So talking about that growth rate, do you see any particular sectors that are actually benefiting and not benefiting, or maybe slow to adopt with this whole digitalization? And what could be some of the potential challenges that the companies might be facing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think there's a straight answer to it, but I'll try to do my best in terms of
Sure.
providing some data points that may help, right? So, obviously, financial services to begin with, because the whole unique identification number that I talked about had to be tied back to a bank account. So banks uh, were the fundamental, I would say, the sectors that sort of started this whole journey. Along with the banks, I would say telecom companies have also benefited massively because the entire process of onboarding your EKYC,
Mhm.
right, has expedited the way customers, rather for the businesses, but individuals had their identities sort of all um, taken care of, right?
Right. Sorry,
Again, just go
before you
ahead.
go forward, KYC is know your customer. Someone who doesn't know the word or first time hearing it. Sorry,
Yeah,
go
yeah,
ahead.
thank you. Yeah, yeah. You need, so any business, right? You need to know your customer before you onboard them, before you sort of start to do business with them, right? It could be as simple or as trivial as going and buying a phone. Before the phone company issues you a phone, they need to know who they're selling it to, right? So all the demographic information, the personal information about this individual is sort of centered around, or KYC is centered around all of that, right? So just to like follow through on that topic, right? So Reliance Jio, which is the country's telecom behemoth, right, single-handedly has covered the nation with about 32 billion worth of high tech telco infrastructure. and
Wow.
use EKYC, the electronic version of the KYC, to onboard on the
Mhm.
on this India stack source, right? So, and has onboarded close to about 100 million customers in the first 6 months of their operations, right? It just basically
Wow.
shattered every record that was out there in terms of business efficiency, in terms of onboarding, in terms of doing it in a very, very impactful manner, right? Where what is super impressive in that whole process is, and this is based on the World Bank estimates, right? The Aadhaar driven eKYC has sort of brought down the customer onboarding cost, right? This is something that everybody can relate to. If you're a bank, you're an insurance company, you're a telecom, you're, regardless of what the business is, the amount of spend that you go through in terms of the marketing, the ops, and then actually onboarding a customer was somewhere around $23 per customer. It was calculated. With this whole eKYC through Aadhaar, it was brought down to 15 cents per customer. So, I mean, that's exponential, first of all, in
It
terms
is.
of cost reduction efficiency. And if you were to extrapolate that data and do it across all things onboarding, right? This just cost reduction number across like new customers, banks, any other businesses, this astronomical number is sort of true savings for the business, right? Which would probably fuel that spend into several things innovation in other areas for businesses. And that's sort of what happened, right? So it's really, really progressive. It is phenomenal in terms of scale, and it's very, very seamless.
Right. That's awesome. I feel it's encouraging too, because this whole technology is being adopted by some other countries like Saudi Arabia, Singapore. I think I've read about Australia too. Like these countries have adopted this digital UPI technology into their respective markets. So it's really like encouraging as well as, I would say, kind of challenging for India too, because they need to keep up with a lot of advancements in that area just to keep their friends happy.
Correct, correct. So I think maybe just on that point, right, just to add to what you're saying, uh, the most recent one is all about the remittances, right? Again, on the back of
Right.
payments. If you look at the Indian diaspora across the regions, and what India was able to do on top of UPI to enable remittances through a straightforward peer-to-peer sort of a transfer is another huge step or leapfrog effect in terms of forex payments, right? As an
Right.
example, if I had my family sitting in Singapore, and if I have to do money transfer, I don't necessarily have to go through any financial institution to do that. All I got to do is pick up my phone. I need a mobile phone number, and then it's peer-to-peer payments. Now, while it may sound very trivial, but we're talking cross-border payment mechanism, right? There's forex
Right.
involved. There's several financial institutions in between involved. There is authorization, verification, validation. All of the things under the hood happen in near real time, right? And it has done extremely well already. It's been, I believe, my memory serves right, it's been about 6 months or so with Singapore and some
Hmm.
of the other countries that you just mentioned. That is another pilot that India has kicked off. And in the world of payments, I believe we're at least a decade ahead of the nearest competition. The last I checked, just in the number of transactions, I'm not talking about Forex, but just in the number of UPI transactions within India, we're talking upwards of about 9 billion transactions, not the dollar value, but the number of transactions, right? Then you can
Uh,
sort of, it's a multiplier effect in terms of what that means.
and that is in the span of how much time?
That's the current snapshot, right? So if you were to sort of put that in terms of historic, so UPI really kicked off in 2016, 2017 timeframe, right? So we
Hmm.
went from there, not having any payments, peer to peer sort of a mechanism, to where we are. What is this, 2023? In about 6, 7 years, to about
Right.
9 billion transactions a month. And it's predicted to go that high in a 24-hour period, meaning 9 to 10 billion transactions a day in the next few years, the way
Wow.
this is growing. Yeah.
I'm right now actually thinking about the backend systems to support all these transactions. That could have been a Hercules challenge for someone who is managing that.
Yeah, I think, see, that is I would say, the most fascinating point for me, the point that you just mentioned, right? In terms of scale, right? There's no dearth of scale in India. If you have done something in India, nobody can question scale, number one.
Right.
Number two is, India is all about frugal innovation, right? There is not humongous amounts of capital sitting everywhere and people can tap into, right? Again, because it's a
True.
large population base, you get, and country as such is sustaining on its own. It's got various challenges and all of that jazz. But fundamentally, if you look at what India was able to do in the area of space recently,
Right.
right? Now, media is sort of trivializing that as much as possible, but in my view, it's one of the phenomenal advancements in scientific, I would say, space adventure sorts, right? Because we were able to put a satellite on the moon, on the dark side of the moon, as the first
Totally agree.
country that has ever done it, right? Sure, I mean, yeah, several countries have gone to the moon, but there is a straight shoot to the moon versus going on the other side. There's a huge difference. If you were to double click on that just topic, look up for some
Right.
videos, you'll know how complex that is. The real kicker is,
Hmm.
we were able to do that with almost negligible amount of money in the world of space. Right? We're talking about $75 million for this space exploration to go land on the most complex terrain, right? Where you can't necessarily, it's not easily accessible, right? So
True.
that is what India has done, right? It has put itself in the map. And I keep joking about this to a lot of my friends and colleagues, right? In terms of, it is significantly lower than what Hollywood typically spends on making a movie, the space
Right.
program, right? So at the same time, it's just, I don't think they get the recognition that they're supposed to, right? If this was something that NASA has done, you would have heard it a million times already,
Hmm.
right? Because it's India, it's developing, nobody really cares, right? I think we as individuals need to start to beat that drum. There's a lot of progress that's being made and coming from this side of the world, and I want to be a part of that growth story and contribute towards it.
Love that. Love that statement. Part of that growth story. I will
Yeah,
support you.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
this is a good
sorry,
start.
yeah, definitely. We have a little time constraint here. I have one more question before we wrap up. Uh, this
Sure.
whole this whole implementation, how do you think it's going to actually impact the digital economy or the GDP of the country in any way possible?
Yeah. So before I get to the GDP aspect of it, right? A couple of things I want to touch on, and then I'll get to the GDP part of that question, right? So one is, so as we start to move forward, we as a nation, right now, India stack has been really successful. Scale, innovation, ingenuity. You're adding layers on top of it, making it even more adaptable, right? Going forward, what else can you do, right, as a nation, right? There's this whole initiative of Digital India. So platforms like Open Credit Enablement Network, right?
Hmm.
This is the next big program that the government is sort of embarking on.
Okay.
So what that is expected to do is, it democratizes the credit at scale, right? It enables like credit penetration at a lower cost, making the decisions and dispersals, right, on the cash flow fairly easy for businesses, which is humongous, right? If you think of how India operates today, it's a very fractured ecosystem
Hmm.
for the most part. There's obviously various layers which are sort of now converging, but if
Right.
you look at retail, the most fragmented part of the business is retail. Right? You get your distribution channels versus how your mom and pop stores operate at the end of the streets, right? I mean, you know how India operates, right? So
Hmm.
for you to be able to sort of provide that, this is a massive, massive initiative. The other one on the back of it, or maybe in parallel to this, is called ONDC, which is Open Network for Digital Commerce, right? Which is another phenomenal platform that can help transform, right, and onboard micro and small and medium enterprises, right, and small trades on a single platform, right? It thereby sort of gives more choices to customers, and it has access to a variety of products, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it sort of opens up e-commerce to buyers and sellers of all sizes, and it's predicted to become the next big UPI sorts, right? So
Mm-hmm.
in summary, I think we're sort of in a very, very progressive path, and heading in the right direction. Now, tying that back to the GDP question, I think it's a very relevant data point for your viewers to sort of latch onto, right? India's debt to GDP ratio, okay, is only in the neighborhood of 55%, okay, which is
Can you
among,
put that
yeah,
into
which is
like?
the lowest, yeah, it's among the lowest in compared to all the large economies globally. Let's see, if I take US, right,
Mm-hmm.
debt to GDP for US, again, there's fluctuating numbers, but directionally, it's sitting somewhere in the 125% range. It's as simple as your household, right? You're making $100, you're spending $125,
Ah, okay. So okay,
right?
that's what we call
So,
debt to GDP ratio. Okay.
correct, yeah. So which means it doesn't necessarily give you any disposable income or any savings for that rainy day,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're always like in a catch-up mode. Now, if you were to extrapolate that and look at it at a nation's perspective, right? What are you going to do when you're always trying to pay more than what you're making,
Right.
right? So that's the 55% versus 125. I mean, countries like Japan are outrageous, right? So all these, obviously, they're developed nations, they have a different challenge. I'm not questioning that even a bit. But I'm saying for you to be able to manage and contain for a growing economy like this, it's very, very
Mm-hmm.
difficult. India is doing a really remarkable job in that sort of an area, right? If you look at the financial crisis that US went through in the 2008 2010
Right.
timeframe, that's essentially because of things like this. You do not have enough control functions to manage that at a national level,
Mm-hmm.
then it's easy to break. Or even the most recent SVB story, the Silicon Valley Bank that happened, the
Right.
bank run that happened about 6 to 8 months ago, people were just like, they've gone out all out crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything was haywire. And the feds and the government has to come in and then sort of, sustain that confidence. So that only happens because you're always on the brink of breaking, right?
Right.
So that's number one, right? It's very, very important to understand that, right? And then the programs I talked about. Now, in
Mm-hmm.
addition to that, there have been several other delivery programs, right? Maybe this, I can tie this back to one of the previous questions you asked about sectors, right?
Right.
So just a quick rundown in terms of COVID, right? 1.3 billion people got their vaccine, all of that, right? Various doses. But it was literally one quick message from my phone. I could get my vaccination certificate at any given point. Yeah, what's the big deal?
Wow.
Yeah, it is a big deal because you're talking about demographic information, your personal information, somewhere it's all stored. You're tied to the whole healthcare providers who are actually providing vaccination, what kind of vaccination, back to the pharma company. So there's a myriad of underlying aspects all integrated so seamlessly, and click of a button in a millisecond with zero latency, I get that information anytime. Okay, that's a massive, I would say that is definitely frugal innovation right in the center of all of that.
Right.
Then you've got healthcare, right? There's another government initiative called Ayushman Bharat. There's educational training initiatives. This whole taxation, how they've gone from individual states to a national wide tax platform.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got e-government services trying to do or making businesses easier. And there's several programs coming out from agri-tech to livestock to skilling. So it's not just like focused on one particular sector. They're using this
Right.
as a baseline, but they're just like creating an entire foundation for multiple platforms to sort of succeed. So I think to sort of square off your question, right? Where is this all heading, or where is the country heading, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is very, very ambitious in my view, because we're sitting probably in a what, even the being the fifth largest economy, we're in the $4 trillion range today in 2023. And India's gained independence about 75 years ago.
Right.
So between 75 to 100, so in the next 25 years, government has set out a very ambitious plan to become a $26 trillion economy, right? Going from 4 to 26 is a huge,
Wow.
huge jump. But I think, foundational aspects are really good. but we'll have to see
Right.
what future brings for us.
I think it
What
has
that
to be
does,
sustainable enough to carry that over.
correct? Yeah, sustainability comes with a lot of other factors, right, which are always pulling
Right.
you in different directions. And if you were to really talk about becoming a $26 trillion economy by 2047, right, which is about 25, like roughly in that direction, right,
Hmm.
years, the goal is to become a developed economy by then,
Right.
right? Now, developed economy with 1.4 billion population today, which is going to significantly grow by that time, and the per capita is estimated right now to be at 15,000 US dollars by 2047, 2048, which is also significant per
Hmm.
capita across 1.4 billion. Maybe, I don't know, we'll reach 1.7 or maybe upwards of that. Who knows with the way we're growing?
Right.
But it's a very ambitious goal to sort of drive towards, right? So, but in the midterm, in the medium term, India would still remain the fastest growing, largest economy,
True.
right? That's the bright side.
True.
Anyway,
I
so
think the
hopefully this was
momentum
helpful.
has to keep going.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, hopefully this was helpful. I was maybe able to provide some enough data points for your viewers to sort of
No, this
connect.
was great. I know it's not a topic which can be wrapped up within 30 minutes. We can sit and talk for like an hours, but due to the time constraint, I unfortunately have to wrap it up here. But I'm definitely looking forward to have many more discussions on this topic with you. Definitely in my future episodes. But yeah, thanks again for joining. Thanks for the valuable time. I know how busy man you are, and really appreciate. And thanks, viewers and listeners. Stay tuned for my next episode. Bye.
Awesome. Thanks so much.